and the First Lady, and also former President Lech Walesa was there, and he wanted to talk about some of the accomplishments that they've met there.
This is my first visit to Central Europe as president, and I am thrilled that it could be right here at this magnificent, beautiful piece of land. It is beautiful. Poland is the geographic heart of Europe, but more importantly, in the Polish people, we see the soul of Europe. Your nation is great because your spirit is great, and your spirit is strong. For 2 centuries, Poland suffered constant and brutal attacks. But while Poland could be invaded and occupied, and its borders even erased from the map, it could never be erased from history or from your hearts. In those dark days, you have lost your land, but you never lost your pride. So it is with this true admiration that I can say today that from the farms and villages of your countryside to the cathedrals and squares of your great cities, Poland lives, Poland prospers, and Poland prevails. Despite every effort to transform you, oppress you, or destroy you, you endured and overcame. You are the proud nation of Copernicus. Think of that. Chopin, St. John Paul II. Poland is a land of great heroes. And you are a people who know the true value of what you defend. The triumph of the Polish spirit over centuries of hardship gives us all hope for a future in which good conquers evil and peace achieves victory over war.
And continuing with that theme of heroes, President Trump pointed out that Poland has been a symbol of hope since the beginning of our nation, and that Polish heroes fought side by side with American heroes in the War of Independence, which is important to realize here just after the 4th of July. And he went on to talk about how our countries have worked together.
Our 2 countries share a special bond forged by unique histories and national characters. It's a fellowship that exists only among people who have fought and bled and died for freedom.
And he went on to say this moment reminds us of the more than 150,000 Poles who died during that desperate struggle to overthrow oppression in communism and others.
Through 4 decades of communist rule, Poland and the other captive nations of Europe endured a brutal campaign to demolish freedom, your faith, your laws, your history, your identity, indeed the very essence of your culture and your humanity. Yet through it all, you never lost that spirit. Your oppressors tried to break you, but Poland could not be broken. And when the day came on June 2nd, 1979, and 1 million Poles gathered around Victory Square for their very first Mass with their Polish Pope, that day every communist in Warsaw must have known that their oppressive system would soon come crashing down. They must have known it at the exact moment during Pope John Paul II's sermon, when 1 million Polish men, women, and children suddenly raised their voices in a single prayer. 1 million Polish people did not ask for wealth. They did not ask for privilege. Instead, 1 million Poles sang 3 simple words: "We want God."
Very interesting. And the president went on to say that the continent that Poland is on no longer is threatened by the specter of communism, but that doesn't mean that we are safe by any means. There are many threats out there to our security and way of life, and he sees that happening out there right now.
We are confronted by another oppressive ideology, one that seeks to export terrorism and extremism all around the globe. America and Europe have suffered one terror attack after another. We're going to get it to stop.
He ended up energizing the audience so much that they began yelling, "Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump." And he went on to say that we cannot accept those who reject our values and whose use of hatred to justify violence against the innocent.
Today, the West is also confronted by the powers that seek to test our will, undermine our confidence, and challenge our interests. To meet new forms of aggression, including propaganda, financial crimes, and cyber warfare, we must adapt our alliance to compete effectively in new ways and on all new battlefields. We urge Russia to cease its destabilizing activities in Ukraine and elsewhere, and its support for hostile regimes, including Syria and Iran, and to instead join the community of responsible nations in our fight against common enemies and in defense of civilization itself.
I'm Penna Dexter. I'm a little late getting into the studio, but it's wonderful to just hear this speech, Buddy. And the whole tenor of the speech, I think, was a defense of Western values and of the West. And coming from this president after the former sort of foreign message that Obama would send, I think that it's uplifting, and it's actually a little bit unexpected. I expected something great, but not something this soaring.
Mm-hmm. It was very, very good. And the threat here is communism, not capitalism.
Absolutely. And we'll be right back for more of Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Pastor Ray Johnston has a new book out that talks about how the church has become like the culture. He illustrates this by describing the 7 decades that have changed everything. We talked about these remarkable changes recently on my radio program. The 1950s were a time when America lost its innocence. Rock music was born. Teenagers were liberated from their parents by cars. Every home got a television set. The 1960s were a time when America lost authority. America was on the eve of destruction with protests about civil rights in the Vietnam War. It was a decade of drug use, Woodstock, and the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert Kennedy. The 1970s were a time when Americans lost love. It became the me decade after the disillusionment that took place in the 1960s. In the 1980s, Americans lost values as people got preoccupied with glamour, fashion, wealth, and media. The movie Wall Street may have summarized the decade with the phrase, "greed is good." Then in the 1990s, Americans lost faith with the jarring images that occurred during that time. The 2000s were a time when Americans lost security. It began with a concern over Y2K, but moved from a scare to a real fear when terror struck on September 11th, 2001. And the 2010s seemed to be a time when Americans lost hope. They weathered the Great Recession, but did not believe that the future would be better than the past. Of course, Christian faith has the answers to these challenges. We can find innocence in the forgiveness of God, love in the love of God, values in the Word of God, faith in the promises of God, and hope in God Himself. The real question is whether we in the church will bring this message. That is why Ray Johnston titled his book, "Jesus Called, He Wants His Church Back." I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and again, excuse me for walking in late. That's a rare occurrence, but it sure happened today, and thank God, really, that Dr. Merrill Matthews was here. He's an old hand here at Point of View. He's been coming in for many, many years.
I didn't like the term old there.
Well, you're not as old as me, I don't think, but you've been coming in probably longer than I have.
Yeah, 25 years, I think, or so.
So ever since you were a young graduate school student, I think, you were coming in on policy. And anyway, at this point, his title is Resident Scholar, Institute for Policy Innovation, and that's what he thinks about. He spends his days thinking and writing and speaking about policy, and especially in the area of health care. And that's why I thought it was important that we have him in today, because we're coming upon this time when the Senate is going to come back from this recess, and we're hearing, buddy, that it's not going well out there in the states. They're not accepting the Senate plan. So more and more senators are sort of dropping off their support. So something different has to happen. We posted a Washington Post article which just announces that Mitch McConnell says, well, we have to pass something, whether it be with Democrats or not.
I agree. The Obamacare is imploding in the individual market. That's where people go out and buy their own policies. It's a fairly small market, but it's the thing that President Obama thought was the real genius of his plan, was creating these health insurance exchanges. Individuals could go in, buy policies from a wide range of insurance companies. They'd be getting really affordable policies. They'd be getting subsidized and so forth. All of that is collapsing. So they need to do something if the individual market's going to survive. And right now, the latest thing that we had was that at the end of last week, Senator Rand Paul came out and said, well, maybe we should go back to, it was Senator Sass from Nebraska who said maybe we should go and just do repeal legislation and then come back and do replace legislation after that, which was the initial plan. Yeah. That's what they wanted to do initially. And as Senator Rand Paul stepped up had a piece that he published in Rare.us on January 2nd saying, I think we ought to do these at the same time. Senator Paul sent out a tweet on January 6th saying, I've just talked to Donald Trump. He agrees with me. We need to do this at the same time. So that's what they decided to do. The problem was they didn't have a replacement plan. And so as a result, Paul Ryan had to put all the repeal process on hold for several weeks while he had people in the House trying to craft a replacement plan in the back, in the shadows to come up with and finally reveal that thing. They weren't getting support for it initially, and they had to make some changes, and came back in April 1st of May and passed the legislation.
Well, buddy, does this signal that all along the plan was clean repeal, and then come back and replace
Absolutely.
it?
And the reason they thought they could do that is in 2015, they passed repeal legislation through the reconciliation process. They got the votes in the House, they got the votes in the Senate, and then President Obama vetoed that in early 2016. So they said, we've already voted on this. We were able to get it through the House and Senate with a Democratic president. And so they decided to, that's what they wanted to do, get the repeal done, say we're going to have a 2 or 3 year phase down. So if you have Obamacare coverage, if you were in one of the Medicaid expanded states, nothing happens immediately. It's going to be 2 or 3 years, and then in the next few months, we'll come up with our replacement legislation, and then there'll be a couple of years to be able to sort of gear everything up and make that transition. And of course, when they changed that created a real problem. Politico has a piece out today highlighting how all this sort of worked around, and how Rand Paul, who now says maybe we should do repeal and then come up with a replace, was a key figure, not the only one, but a key figure in changing that strategy initially.
Yeah, why is Rand Paul so powerful and listened to? I mean, it's just kind of interesting. I wish they would have done it. Now I hear that even President Trump supports the idea of just clean repeal, give them a year to get it done, replace it, and, let's do it. Is McConnell's idea, buddy, for shoring up the insurance market, is it even possible to do in a bill like we have in the Senate?
I think it's possible, especially if they adopt Ted Cruz's plan. Ted Cruz has been out there saying we ought to allow insurance companies they should be required to offer one that provides all the benefits and so forth that Obamacare wants, but then offer a lot of other policies that people can choose. Now, he's getting criticized by some for saying, well, look, that will that will implode the market. Sick people will move into the comprehensive plan, and then when they get well or healthy people will stay into the less expensive plans. And yes, that's probably what will happen. What that will in effect do, I think, is create the comprehensive plans will become de facto high-risk pools set up for sicker people, and then the federal government would funnel money to the insurance companies, as they're doing in Alaska right now and Maine, to help offset premiums in Obamacare. And both the Republican plans have money being funneled to insurance companies to help them sort of keep premiums low. So why not just do it that way? Let the 98% of the population be in a plan of their choice. The small number of people who are very sick, they move into the Obamacare plan. It's going to be very expensive, but we're subsidizing it, and it's going to be essentially a high-risk pool for sick people.
Well, this is what, I mean, we should say I told you so, because back when they were debating Obamacare, we said, why take over the whole health insurance industry? Why not leave it as is and take, high-risk pools, high-risk plans, which are working well in some states, needed help in other states.
Right.
Allow the people that have, real issues, pre-existing conditions that, they haven't had covered and all of that, allow them to be helped in that way. Well, that's what this is going to turn out to be. It sounds to me like eventually down the road, we could, if we go the right direction, be back to a much more sort of free market type system, not completely, but more. If we replace Obamacare, but leaving some of the basic foundations of it, as the Senate bill does and the House bill does, we will have a less free system.
There was always some agreements among Republicans and Democrats. Both of them wanted to make sure that low-income people had some kind of subsidy to make sure they could afford health insurance. They wanted to have a safety net there for people who had major medical conditions. So that was sort of a key to it. The difference was that President Obama wanted to fundamentally restructure the health insurance system rather than just sort of fixing the problem. We could have fixed the problem. It wouldn't have cost much money, and we could have moved on. But that's not what Democrats wanted to do 7 years ago.
Let's open up the phones, and in the next segment, we'll start taking calls 800-351-1212. A couple of different points. One is, after the Senate put out its plan, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, then scored it. And there are problems with those scores, aren't there? There
are problems. The Congressional Budget Office is seldom right on these things, but just like a weatherman, it doesn't seem to keep people from paying attention to them. But yes.
Especially senators and congressmen.
And some of the strange things they did, Penna, they went... Every year, the CBO sort of does a projection of how many people will be uninsured and covered and so forth. So in the 2016 projection, they said, we expect that roughly 28 million people will be insured under Obamacare, under the exchanges. 2017, they said, it's probably going to be more like 20 million, maybe 21 million. Ironically, when they projected how many people will lose coverage or won't buy coverage under the Republican plan, they went to the 2016 estimate rather than the 2017 estimate, making it look like a number more people, several million more people, would be uninsured than in the initial. In addition, under the CBO scoring, they said they essentially assumed if you go out and buy something that's not qualified insurance, what we call mini meds or limited health insurance policies, they just assumed you were going to be uninsured. They just sort of lumped them into the uninsured, even though millions of them may have been very happy with a less comprehensive, less expensive plan. But it wasn't going to be sort of Obamacare close, and so they just assumed they lumped them into the uninsured.
So the key here is, according to liberal Democrats government, if you don't have the insurance policy that we want you to have with all the bells and whistles that we think you should have, you aren't insured. Anything less is uninsured. And so we want now, Cruz, Lee, and others are saying some of these policies don't have to quite be these they don't have to have everything.
They don't have
to give men maternity benefits and things like that.
And in fact, for young, healthy people, that's the best thing. Back before Obamacare, California, the Anthem and the Blue Cross plan in California had created what they called tonic plans, spelled Tonik, and they were meant, you had to be under 29 or younger to buy it. And I think the prices were maybe $49 a month, $79, and maybe $129, and they offered $10 generic prescriptions, 5 or 6 doctor's visits, a maximum of, say, if I remember right, $25,000 of care, which actually gets most people most years. And they were really popular, but that would have been considered junk insurance under Obama.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to hear from you, 800-351-1212. What kind of health insurance system should we have? What experience have you had? What problems? And what successes? We'll take your calls after this.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question: where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kirby's Viewpoints commentary. Click the Take Action link, learn about important issues, and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And we are taking your calls here at Point of View, 800-351-1212. We have some folks waiting on the line to talk about Obamacare. Dr. Merrill Matthews is with me, and we want to bring one more topic to the table also, because one of the other things that President Trump has done, and by the way, we are going to play a few more bites from the speech and comment on it a little bit later, because it's sort of worth doing throughout the show. It was a wonderful speech. But he did refer, Dr. Matthews, in the speech he sort of, I saw that he was speaking to Poland. He was also speaking to the world. And then there was the messages to Russia and the Soviet Union, too. And one had to do with energy. You don't have a monopoly for the world's energy anymore because the U.S. now has some capabilities that we didn't have, correct?
Exactly right. The U.S. is in the energy business once again. And it has been for a little while, much to the chagrin of President Obama. But what's happening is that we are starting, one thing that happened is that President Obama signed something to get a budget deal, but it allowed us to start exporting crude oil. That was one major plus. And so the crude oil exports have been ramping up, and liquefied natural gas. If you're going to ship natural gas, you have to cool it to 260 degrees below zero to get it to a liquid, and then you're able to ship it on various tankers. There wasn't a prohibition against that, but the Obama administration basically slow-walked applications from companies trying to get the permission to build terminals to liquefy natural gas.
So we're producing the gas, but we can't move it. And
that's one of the reasons why natural gas has been so low here lately. We've become the leader in producing natural gas in the world. And it's clean, it burns cleaner than oil and coal and so forth. So it's a good energy product. The environmentalists used to love it because it was much more cleaner burning. They considered it a transition fuel as they moved to cleaner energy. They don't like it as much anymore because we're actually doing that. But at any rate, we're really expanding our ability to be able to export liquefied natural gas. And Poland is dependent upon Russian gas through pipelines. And Russia uses its energy as a foreign policy hammer to try to keep people in line and not dissent from what Russia wants to do. So the president of Poland said, we'd like to have some other options out there, and thankfully, we're going to be able to provide those options for them.
You know, President Trump has received criticism, of course, from certain people for pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords. Mm-hmm. And we have a piece, it's yours, Dr. Matthews, at pointofview.net. It's in the Hill. And as a matter of fact, this piece and some of your things that you write actually go in a small summary. What do you call it?
Policy bites.
The policy bites. And they go and they actually are picked up by members of Congress. Mm-hmm. And they get to see, this informs them in what they do. And so this piece was so good because it talked about how, because of this capability that we've developed in natural gas, we may be on track to meet our Paris goals anyway, or even exceed them, and to help other countries do it.
Because of the natural gas boom that we've had, it has increased the production of natural gas, which has lowered the price. So power generation plants, the plants that provide our electricity, have been increasingly shifting from coal to natural gas, just because of the abundance and the cheapness of it, and because it emits about a third to a half of the carbon emissions that coal does. So they've been transitioning over to natural gas, which has lowered our carbon emissions, and we're actually on track to meet the Paris Accords if we keep things up at the current pace, even though many other countries that are criticizing us aren't. And so by us producing more natural gas, we may be able to sell that to some of these other countries that are still using coal and other things.
Yeah, what about China?
China is a big coal user. It uses, I think, 3 or 4 times the amount of coal that the second one, which is India, uses. And so by producing this natural gas, we may be able to help them, and that might help some of these other countries who are scolding us actually meet their Paris agreement.
Very interesting. It's just sort of along the same theme that America is a strong country. We don't need an international babysitter telling us, what to do with our businesses and how to clean up our environment. When you're wealthy, when you're prosperous, then you can afford to take the measures that clean up pollution, that
Absolutely.
burn cleaner. It's a process.
And this is the market driving it. It's our technology that allowed us to, through fracking and other type of innovative drilling techniques that sort of got us over the plateau to where oil and natural gas are abundant again. And we'll see how it turns out. But natural gas is just doing really, really well for us right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking your calls. You can certainly weigh in on this issue, too. And again, go to pointofview.net and see Dr. Merrill Matthews' piece from the Hill. We've posted it there. But let's go now. We've got some callers waiting. Let's go to New Hampshire and speak with Bob. Hi, Bob. You're on Point of View. Thanks for calling in.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. One thing I don't understand is why the politicians don't just look at statistics and take a look at really kind of what the real issues are in relation to health insurance.
What do you think they are? Sometimes statistics can be manipulated.
Yeah, but if you look at the government numbers, less than 4% of Americans spend more than $10,000 that are under the age of 65, so they're not on Medicare, spend more than $10,000 a year on insurance, on catastrophic issues like cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So, if the government were to become, in my opinion, the catastrophic plan for everyone, at some level, $25,000, whatever it is, it would cost less money and premiums could be lowered. And the real problem with it is that the way that insurance companies are shifting things is now, for example, I work for a company that has 18,000 employees, but my insurance is, is a platinum plan, but they don't pay $1 until I pay my deductible, which is $2,000. So they don't pay co-pays, they don't pay anything until I get to $2,000. Most families, it's $6,000. So, it's not just what you're paying for insurance, it's what you're paying after you pay for insurance.
Absolutely.
That's really hurting the middle class.
And
so,
Bob, to your point, in the group market, that is where you get your health insurance through your employer, and that's about 155 million Americans and their dependents. Those tend to be $1,000, $2,000, $2,500, maybe $3,000. That tends to be the deductible. Where you're talking about $6,000, $7,000 deductibles, that's typically the individual who goes out and buys their own policy because they don't have employer-based insurance. They're not eligible for Medicare or Medicaid. Now, the interesting point, when you say perhaps the government provide a $25,000 deductible policy, what the problem was that Democrats for years hated high deductible policies. They have been bashing me for 25 years talking about high deductibles. But, Penna, I was always talking about a $2,000, $2,500 deductible for our family.
That used to be high.
That was where they criticized me. Now their plans in these bronze are $6,000 and $7,000 deductibles, set $14,000 for a family. Nobody can afford that. It's just unbelievable. And you oftentimes have to spend that whole $14,000 before insurance comes in and pays a dime. It's incredible what has happened now, and Democrats have to defend that.
It's amazing.
And the only thing is that statistically, I think that if they really looked at it and looked at the numbers over the last 10 years, it is less than 4% of Americans that spend over $10,000. If the government just took over we wouldn't need all these.
You mean just to help that 4%?
Yes.
But Bob, where I think you're laboring under a false assumption, you're assuming that people in the government want to solve the problem rather than wanting to create a government-run health insurance system. And what they really wanted to do, if they'd wanted to solve the problem, it could have been done easily. They wanted to come in and micromanage the whole healthcare system because they thought they could make it work better.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I just can't understand why someone can't sit down and really look at the numbers and say, okay, so 4% of Americans have over $10,000 worth of medical debt, and the government becomes, for everybody in the country, anything over $25,000 so that you don't go bankrupt, we'll take it. We'll take care of it. It would cost the government less, and, basically insurance premiums could come down because the maximum insurance payout for a private insurer would be $25,000.
Well, Bob,
so I just think they need to look at statistics and revamp the system.
I can tell you, having talked to Democrats when they were looking at passing this, they had no idea how the health insurance system worked. And when you would try to explain it, when you would say, if you do this, you're going to have young, healthy people begin to stay out of the system, and the pools are going to get smaller and sicker, they would look at you and say, no, President Obama says this is going to lower health insurance premiums by $2,500 a year, and everybody will be in the system. And you couldn't tell them a thing.
And if you like your doctor, you can keep him. And if you like your insurance plan, you can keep it.
Yeah, we tossed those out 3 years ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us here at Point of View. And again, our number is 800-351-1212. Bob, that was a great call. Thank you. And, it really is about taking over the whole system. It's really now or never for us, I think, which direction we're going to go.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Right around the time we celebrate Independence Day, Canada celebrates Canada Day. July 1st marked 150 years since Canada became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. The U.S. has a longer history of independence. But when it comes to implementing radical social policy, Canada is outpacing the United States. Wisely, the U.S. Defense Department decided last week to take a step back to look at whether it's really a good idea to allow open transgenders to be inducted into the military, as had been mandated by the previous administration. But Canada is moving full speed ahead with its progressive transgender agenda. Ontario, Canada's most populous province, recently passed a law that could allow the government to remove children from their adoptive and foster homes if their parents decline to affirm and cater to their gender confusion. This is the fifth law Ontario has enacted related to gender ideology in the past 5 years. In 2012, Ontario's Human Rights Code was altered to add gender identity and gender expression when considering special protections. Bill 13, passed in 2012, compels public schools to guarantee that students can form gay-straight alliances and demanded that schools combat what's being termed homophobic and transphobic biases. In 2015, Bill 77 was enacted. This law prohibits parents from providing therapy for minors to help them attempt to fight their gender dysphoria or homosexual tendencies. Late in 2016 came Bill 28, which removed the terms mother and father from Ontario law and allows preconception agreements in which 4 unrelated people may become parents to a child. The think tank Cardis Family provides research on Canadian social policy. Its leader penned a warning published in the Daily Signal. It reads, 5 gender bills in 5 years makes Ontario's story a cautionary tale for our friends and neighbors to the south. We should pay attention. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter. Dr. Merrill Matthews is with me. And next week, the senators will be back in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a week of debate and discussion. Maybe not on the floor of the Senate, but at least discussions among senators. And then, of course, there's another recess deadline. They take so many recesses in the summer in Washington, D.C. that it's amazing. But those are what are held over the heads of senators to get something done, I think, and members of Congress. So, we don't know what's going to come out of this. Is this going to, because there's this other part I want to ask you about, Buddy, and that is Medicaid. The federal government's part of Medicaid, of course, was offered to states to get them on board with Obamacare. And some states took it, some didn't. The ones that took it now are against the Senate plan for the most part.
That's right. And you sort of knew this was going to happen. Once you started adding to the trough, people were going to, those people were going to be reluctant to pull back from it. There is, Mitch McConnell has suggested that he has a lot more money in his pocket to help, in essence, buy off the senators who are saying, we're concerned about Medicaid. So we'll see what happens there. I think there's a fair chance he may be able to get some of those on board. If Ted Cruz's amendment gets a little traction, I think the House Freedom Caucus has come up and said that they could support that. If that gets a little traction, he may be able to get to 50. If he gets to 50, he'll get Vice President Pence to come in and vote for it. Then the wise strategy, I think, would be to say, take this bill, don't do a normal conference committee where the House and Senate works out the differences. Take the Senate bill, take it over to the House, pass the Senate bill in the House so that you can actually send something to President Trump to sign. And that bypasses having to come back and vote for it again in the Senate if they want to try to get something done.
Okay, you've heard the strategy from Dr. Merrill Matthews. Let's see if the senators follow that path. I love Ted Cruz and Mike Lee's idea. I think it makes a lot of sense.
One of the part of the strategy, which is tell them if we don't get this done, we're staying through the August recess. Remember, back in, I think, 2011, they were coming up to a budget deadline. The government was going to shut down and so forth. They didn't have they needed to pass the money. And they said, we're going to stay in here until we get the money. And all of a sudden, right before the shutdown of August, the House and Senate came to an agreement, passed the thing, got it out so they could go home in August.
Well, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are taking your calls. We want to hear from you on this issue. Let's go to Larry in Texas. Larry, thanks for calling in.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead. What's your idea?
Well, like I said, in 1972, the insurance companies, they all want to make a profit. And they would say back in those eras that we can't insure you for pre-existing conditions, like using a bad wreck and you broke your ankle and it'll never be the same. But let me tell you, we'll put a rider on it, we'll cover your left one and everything else from now on.
Okay.
And that's the way the insurance did it. They would not insure something you didn't have previously. But let me tell you something. Everybody don't get sick and go to the hospital at the same time.
Right.
And therefore, we should have a smaller deductible. Like you say, $2,600 deductible tells me you don't have no insurance.
Yeah, for some people, that's true.
And you know, that Larry's point is correct. Historically, the insurance company said we have to be able to underwrite an individual. This wasn't true for the group market. It wasn't true for Medicare or Medicaid. But if an individual comes up, we need to be able to underwrite that person. And they had three options. They could either not cover something. That's what Larry had suggested. They could charge them more for it. So they either put a rider on it, not cover it, charge them more, or refuse to accept them. When Obama came in, the insurance industry, which at that time their trade association was run by a Democrat, decided we're going to try to go along with this and see if we can craft something that will, help the president. And so they got behind this, and it's created real problems for them because the pools are imploding. Now, I would argue that the insurance industry thinks $6,000 and $7,000 is very high for a deductible also. The reason that we've moved to those higher deductibles is simply to try to keep the policies less expensive. If you want a less expensive policy on the Obamacare exchange, you've got to do that. If you're willing to pay a much higher premium, you can get a lower deductible, but it just costs so much because, as we warned, the pools are imploding. They're getting smaller and sicker, and they just can't make. And insurers are losing millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars, even with those high deductibles.
Well, you have to expect that with two things. Number one, just covering pre-existing conditions is financially very hard for insurance companies. And then number two, the way people have used the system, where many have just waited until they had something that they needed taken care of health-wise, and then they get insurance.
Right.
And they have to be covered. And that was not the case before. And so, what happened, Buddy, and this is it's just so true of anything that remotely resembles socialism. And that is that when people get a taste of the government paying for things, they don't want to let it go. So we made a mistake with having such a generous pre-existing condition sort of measure inside Obamacare. To try to pull that out now, as the House has tried to do in the Senate, and they've got certain ways they are doing it, but people are kicking and screaming because they do not want to get off that benefit. They can't give it up.
Even
and
though,
that's
ironically,
what happens.
It affects very few people. I mean, the Government Accountability Office estimates that maybe there's 3 or 4 million people, so about 1% of the public who are uninsured, have a major medical condition, and would go into the individual market. So the pre-existing conditions is not a major problem in the group market, not a problem in Medicare. You turn 65, you will get it even if you have cancer. Not a problem in Medicaid. It's just that individual market where people can game the system. There was only 16, 17 million people in that market prior to Obamacare, and there were some who had been denied coverage, even though most states had a safety net. But what Obama did was take a small portion of the population that had a serious problem and try to change the whole system to fix that one little problem, and he's made a mess of the whole system.
Yeah, he really has. As he gallivants around the country and around the world in his post-presidency and tries to defend Obamacare, he's done some damage in many areas, and that's one of them. We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. I also want to point you to the Point of View website as we end this hour. We have another hour of Point of View, and we're going to pick up some other topics. Have you heard about this British baby named Charlie Gard? There's some lessons about national insurance and just socialism in his story. This is a sad story. And, the world has gotten, even Donald Trump has gotten behind this little sick baby who may not have a future, but his parents are trying to give him one. We'll talk about that. We'll continue to discuss the speech given in Warsaw, Poland by Donald Trump. But I want to point you to pointofview.net. There we have some articles that sort of pertain to what we've been talking about today, Obamacare, and also Dr. Matthews' article, how U.S. natural gas, it's in the Hill, actually will get lower in countries and help them meet their commitments just because of our natural gas industry. And we don't need a Paris Climate Accord for that, so we're not the villain for pulling out. And some other pieces that we've put there at Point of View. I've also posted President Trump's speech in case it's really great reading in a sense. So you might want to read it. And also, though, we have a donate button. We also have the ability to join the Point of View Truth Team, which is people who really commit to an amount of money that the Lord leads them to support us monthly. And, again, we are a listener-supported ministry. All the time that we have been broadcasting, which is over 40 years, we have depended on those who listen to us, who benefit from us, and who want other people to hear us across the country to help us, to support us. And so any amount that the Lord directs you to give, either one time or monthly, would be greatly appreciated. You can do it by going to pointofview.net.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for sticking with us for the second hour of Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Dr. Merrill Matthews is in studio with me. We spent the first hour talking about Obamacare. What shape is it going to eventually take after the House, the Senate, and everybody else gets a hold of it? Next week, we're going to probably be able to predict for you a little bit more what will happen. Also, go to pointofview.net, check out an article by Dr. Matthews at The Hill. It talks about natural gas, how much hope there is, how we're able to meet our environmental commitments because of it, and help other countries do so. So there's a really great piece there at pointofview.net. And then thirdly, throughout the program, we're going to consider some clips from the president's speech in Warsaw, Poland. And really, you know, he was speaking to the Polish audience there, but his audience was the world and certainly Russia. And it's a different tone, as we mentioned, Buddy, than President Obama. He was apologizing for America. And instead, President Trump was over there talking about how we need to uphold Western values. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, we hold these values simultaneously with other countries like Poland. We've all fought, we've faced hardships, we've fought for freedom. And, you know, now we're having to try to rally the world against another enemy that besides Nazism and communism, which is, you know, the radical Islamic jihadism. And so let's now just go to Warsaw and listen to a piece, because this is one area where people were afraid of President Trump. He's been talking about how other countries ought to share in our common defense through NATO. People thought that he was going to pull us out of NATO. I think when you hear this clip from the president's speech in Warsaw, you're going to understand what's really happening.
As long as we know our history, we will know how to build our future. Americans know that a strong alliance of free, sovereign, and independent nations is the best defense for our freedoms and for our interests. That is why my administration has demanded that all members of NATO finally meet their full and fair financial obligation. As a result of this insistence, billions of dollars more have begun to pour into NATO. In fact, people are shocked, but billions and billions of dollars more coming in from countries that, in my opinion, would not have been paying so quickly. To those who would criticize our tough stance, I would point out that the United States has demonstrated, not merely with words, but with its actions, that we stand firmly behind Article 5, the mutual defense commitment.
That's a pretty strong statement.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, Poland has been paying its fair share, according to Donald Trump, in this. So he's able to stand beside Poland and talk about them, he's able to point to them as paying a fair share into the alliance. And the other interesting thing is he is on his way to meet with Vladimir Putin when he's giving this, and yet he's criticizing communism. Poland was under Russia. So it was a very... what would I say? He was sort of teeing up the issues there with his respect for what Poland has done in terms of coming out of communism and actually creating a much more free market economy.
I think there were subtle messages to Russia. For instance, we mentioned in the beginning of the program that they said that Poland would not be held hostage to a single provider of energy, and then urging Russia to stop supporting Syria and Iran. And apparently there was a ceasefire in southern Syria that was actually announced today. But also at the beginning of President Obama's term, we were supposed to put a missile defense system in from Poland, and that was just scrapped under Obama. And
because it might anger the Russians.
Yeah, right. And so now, and President Trump, in the next clip from the speech, addresses this. Poland is actually going to be purchasing the Patriot air and missile system and establishing it there. So, 8 years later, we're going to see this. Let's listen to that.
We applaud Poland for its decision to move forward this week on acquiring from the United States the battle-tested Patriot air and missile defense system, the best anywhere in the world. That is also why we salute the Polish people for being one of the NATO countries that has actually achieved the benchmark for investment in our common defense. Thank you. Thank you, Poland. I must tell you, the example you set is truly magnificent, and we applaud Poland. Thank you.
And of course, throughout the speech, the Polish listeners were applauding Trump and chanting and all of that. And so finally, I think this was just sort of stirring, but he was asking, President Trump was asking if we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost. Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? These are some of the things he stood for, and he's kind of putting together why he stands for these things. Because of our values, because America is part of the West, this is what we are defending and standing for. Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? He got applause, and then he said this.
We can have the largest economies and the most lethal weapons anywhere on earth. But if we do not have strong families and strong values, then we will be weak and we will not survive. If anyone forgets the critical importance of these things, let them come to one country that never has. Let them come to Poland.
All right. Buddy Matthews, I think his emphasis on family vows, it's been something that that Poland has actually been famous for over the years, standing for some of the family traditional type values that are so under attack today. So it was good to hear President Trump address that.
It was a very interesting presentation, both because Poland is considered a little bit on the outside, because the president is considered something of a nationalist there too. And you have this sort of notion among a lot of people, it seems like, especially in the media, that you can't support your nation and still work with other countries and have a harmonious relationship, just as some people think you can't support your religion and think that your beliefs are true and still have a good working relationship with people from other religions. And we, as Christians, we've often thought, we believe what we believe. Doesn't mean we accept what others do, but doesn't mean we have to be critical and not be able to have a good working relationship with people with other religions, which we do all the time. So it's an interesting twist, because the media just don't accept that sort of premise.
No, they don't. I think this president, though, has surprised them in many ways. I think, there may be speechwriters that write a speech like this, but a president that doesn't believe these values is not going to give this speech, because he's going to have to defend him with everything that he's got. So thank you, President Trump, and we'll be watching what happens at the G20. And ladies and gentlemen, we'd love to hear from you. You can read this speech at pointofview.net. If you've got any thoughts on it, give us a call. Other words, we're going to get back to policy, so stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You have probably heard comments about certain people living in a bubble. They live in affluent communities cut off from some of the realities that most Americans face. Due to the research by Charles Murray, we can now identify where these bubble communities are located. In his book, Coming Apart, he argued that a high IQ, highly educated upper class was formed over the last half century that is disconnected from the culture of mainstream America. Charles Murray put a quiz in his book that PBS decided to post online. More than 47,000 people posted their scores along with zip codes where they lived when they were 10 years old. Charles Murray did an analysis of the quiz data along with other data, and even though this is not a true representative sample of America, it does provide some interesting conclusions. Overall, it reinforces our general assumption that many of the leaders in politics, business, and the media grew up and often still live in bubble communities. For example, many of the bubbliest zip codes in America are located in New York or California. In New York City, they're found in the Upper West Side and Upper and Lower East Sides in Manhattan. They're also found in Brooklyn and the suburbs of New York. California has lots of bubble zip codes in the San Francisco region, as well as in the Silicon Valley and the Los Angeles region. We can also find lots of bubble zip codes in the Washington, D.C. area, especially in the suburban communities that house many of the politicians, bureaucrats, and other government officials that make policy decisions that affect our everyday lives. So I hope you share my concern that many of the people who have had such a significant influence in our daily lives live in a world with a very thick cultural bubble that separates them from the lives of ordinary Americans. This is not a positive demographic trend. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. We're back on Obamacare, and I just want to read you a couple of paragraphs from an article by Michael Needham, who is with the Heritage Action, part of the Heritage Foundation, and he's a good thinker on these issues, and he says, let's state the obvious. The Senate's Better Care Reconciliation Act, BCRA, you're going to be hearing that a lot next week. It's not full repeal of Obamacare. Any momentum for a clean repeal effort fell by the wayside. We've really been saying that, Dr. Matthews. It fell by the wayside earlier this year. It might have happened then, but it's not going to happen now. Leaves the divided Republican Party to debate both how much of Obamacare to repeal, what should take its place, if anything. So that's kind of the issue I think we're going to hear discussed next year. And, I'd love to hear from you what you'd like to see. There's one part of it, and again, the number is 800-351-1212. One part of it we didn't discuss that always has made so much sense to me, Buddy, is health savings accounts. Mm-hmm. And, it's been incorporated into healthcare over the years, but in a small way. And we haven't seen a robust HSA plan, I don't think, across the country. Ted Cruz, of course, since the beginning of the debate for the Senate version of Obamacare of repealing Obamacare, has been putting together different ideas. And he's such a smart guy. And this one I like a lot. And that is to include health savings accounts in there, and even to allow them not only to be used to purchase health care, but also for your premiums if you need it.
Right. Both the House and Senate expand the limits on HSA so that more people could provide more money to it. That's a good provision. As I understand it, and we haven't, at least at this point, Ted Cruz hasn't actually released the written amendment that he wants to include. So what we're going is off news stories. But I understand that he has in there moving to what we call large HSAs, which allow an employer, say, to provide you with money that the employer would spend on your health insurance policy, put it into your HSA account, and then you have that ability to take the money and either buy into your employer's plan, buy your own health insurance plan, not buy any health insurance plan and use that to pay for health care. This is something that the Cato Institute and Senator Rand Paul have been supporting for some time. There hasn't been much support for it as sort of a comprehensive reform. On the other hand, if Ted Cruz can get that into his amendment and into the Senate legislation, I think that would be a huge plus, because it just simply means if you get employer-based health insurance and your employer provides, spends X number of $1,000s on your health insurance policy, the employer gives that to you tax-free, and you can go buy whatever you want to in the employer's plan, something else. That's a huge freedom issue for people to be able to buy what meets their needs.
If anyone has an HSA and likes it or doesn't like it, give us a call at 800-351-1212. One thing about it that I wonder is if people are a little bit afraid of having control of their own health care because we're so used to having somebody else decide for us.
We are, and there's been the problem that prices have become as transparent as we like. If you go to a doctor and you have health insurance, your insurance company might have negotiated one price, another insurance company negotiated another price. It's very hard to get prices right now because it varies based upon the insurance contract that you have, and those employers, and even your prescription drugs. So the prices have not been as forthcoming as we'd like, but if more people have HSAs, more providers would have to provide some kind of pricing up front so that people know that this doctor or prescription drug is a better value than this other one.
Okay, so 800-351-1212, folks are already starting to call in because, healthcare, it affects all of us. Everybody. And so that's why it's kind of just a core daily issue that you have to deal with, especially if you're sick. And
one of the things that's actually happened from Obamacare being such bad insurance is hundreds of thousands of people have moved over to the Christian healthcare sharing ministries.
That's right.
Including my wife. It has been a real boon for them because that's more like health insurance should work, where you pay a little premium in there. It's going to cover major accidents and illnesses and so forth. It's not going to cover everything. Doesn't pay for things that encourage people to live risky lifestyles. If you live, under Obamacare, you actually get an economic incentive to live a risky lifestyle because those of us who live healthy lifestyles are going to have to subsidize that risky behavior. Whereas normally under an insurance company would say, you're engaged in what? We're not covering that. So you don't want to cut out people who have problems through no fault of their own, but you also don't want to subsidize risky behavior.
Bad behavior. That's right. Absolutely right. One of the things we're trying to do, and that's why I say this is a crucial time right now, because really we could go one way or the other. The Democrats are all ready to pounce on this thing if it doesn't work and we don't get a good replacement, to move it toward a single-payer system and cut out insurance altogether. The government takes care of your health care, and that's what they've got in a lot of European countries.
And that's the real problem, I think. If the Senate plan were to pass something and it fails, then you would have people say, well, see, the free market plan out there passed, and it failed. Obamacare failed. These others have failed. Now it's finally time to go to a single-payer system.
Yeah. So, if we go there, we'll go there. And, I just want to look at some of the warning signs. Number one, there's a new prime minister in Great Britain. And, one of the things that she was faced with when she took office was just a crumbling national health service that is deeply underwater financially. And she needed to get Parliament to appropriate more money just to shore it up. And that's what happens in those systems because they're going to, they make promises of things they're going to provide, and then it just becomes more and more expensive.
Every time I go to England, I track the newspapers there because they produce a lot of newspapers there. And virtually every day there will be an article in there about the National Health Service. The last time I was there a couple of years ago, I was there for the BBC doing a program for them. And in the hotel that I was in, right behind it was the huge statue of the man who created the National Health Service for Great Britain. And while you're looking at that, I have headlines from papers because I bring them back. Am I too old to be treated? So, these people are getting this care, these people aren't. Dentists going on strike because prices are because their reimbursement rates are so low. You see it every time you go over there. It's a huge problem. We have problems. They have problems. We want to fix ours without adopting their problems.
Yeah, why do we want what they have? Let's go back to the phone. Cece is in Colorado. Cece, thanks for calling in.
You're welcome.
What is your comment?
Well, you said call in if you have an HSA and you're happy with it, and I think HSAs are the best kept secret around. I mean, I try to tell all my friends about them, and anybody can open one. The main thing is you have to have a high deductible plan, but almost everybody has that now anyway.
Well, you have to Cece, you actually have to have a qualifying high deductible plan. Not all high deductible plans are compatible.
So that's a catastrophic plan.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it has to be a qualifying high deductible plan. But so many people that I know have high deductibles anyway. Why not buy the high quality, the qualifying one, and save your money yourself, because the premiums are a little lower, and then put the money into a savings account, and even if you don't
tax-free.
It's tax-free, the best kept tax secret there is, and you can build that savings account up to however much you want to build it up to.
You don't lose it at the end of the year.
No, you do not. And that was one of the changes.
It's an individual thing.
We had what was called flexible spending accounts. We still have them, and that's where people identified who worked for an employer. They could put a certain amount of the flexible spending account. If they didn't spend it at the end of the year, it was they lost it. And so you had these explosion of spending in December as people were going out just kind of wasting the money buying extra glasses or things like that because they didn't want to lose it. With HSAs, if you don't spend it, you get to keep it, rolls over, and can gain interest tax-free.
Well, and it becomes an IRA when you become eligible for Medicare.
Absolutely.
So it's a no-brainer. It's a win-win. I try to tell everyone I know to investigate HSA. You do have to open the bank account. It's got to be managed by a company that knows the rules for HSA. But it's really not a whole lot different than just a regular old savings account.
Boy, that's such remember that this is an account. This is an asset that you have.
Yeah, and
it's an asset. Exactly, a tax-free asset.
Back when deductibles were a little lower, employers would sometimes move to the high deductible and then take this premium savings and put that into your HSA. Now employers are struggling just to pay for the premiums under Obamacare.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know what the answer is to Obamacare. I actually have to, say that, to be honest, that I do have a health savings account qualified Obamacare plan this year because my husband and I took a huge pay cut selling our business, and that was the only thing that we could afford.
Everybody's got their situation. Hey, Cece, thank you, though, for just adding to the information here on health savings accounts. Stay with us. We are taking your calls here at Point of View. 800-351-1212, and we'll be right back.
There are those who listen to Point of View while they're driving, and some can listen at home or at work. But here's the question: where do you go where you cannot listen to Point of View? Well, if you have the app, the free Point of View radio app, the answer is just about nowhere. This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kirby's Viewpoints commentary. Click the Take Action link, learn about important issues, and make a difference in this world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, easily contact us with your comments or questions. Don't leave home or the office or anywhere else without Point of View. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the free Point of View radio app. Oh, and one more thing, if you like it, click that little button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app with you on the go.
Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
Well, another story in the news many of us have been sort of following is the story of baby Charlie Gard. He's a British baby. We posted a piece at pointofview.net entitled, it's from First Things, entitled, "Whose Baby is Charlie Gard Anyway?" And if you haven't heard the story, this is an 11-month-old baby who has a rare genetic condition, and he's been in intensive care since October. He's apparently blind, deaf. He's got some kind of breathing help and also a feeding tube. And his parents are just these wonderful parents that they're pulling out all the stops to keep this child alive. And the healthcare system in Great Britain has been giving them trouble. They've had to take it to court, and they've gone all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. This court has ruled just last week that it's time to end this little boy's life. The parents will have none of it. They don't want this to happen. They have actually raised $1.7 million on a GoFundMe campaign to get him to the United States for a very experimental therapy, but they want to do this. But, buddy, this is amazing. The court has ruled that the hospital can just insist on taking the child's life, refuse to release the child. And, you know, you hear about these cases where maybe the parents don't want to provide the care and the hospital does, and the parents' wishes are overruled. You hear other things, but you never hear that if you're willing to fund it yourself, that you can't take your child and do what you want to do. So this is kind of a first, at least a first one that's been publicly sort of reported. And I don't know if this is a result of the socialized medicine mindset. It's obviously not really a financial issue.
And it's I think, a little bit different deal in that the government thinks it knows best, that the child has gone through enough pain and suffering, and that the government does not feel there's any benefit in doing this, and so they want to end the child's pain and suffering. But the parents are the ones who ought to be the ones to make the decision here. You know, remember back in Terry Schiavo's case, there the parents, the husband wanted her life ended. Her parents said, we're happy to take her and take care of her from now on. Went through the courts, several things in Florida, and finally the courts decided with the husband. So Terry Schiavo lost her life in that. But when you have, I mean, I remember listening to Bill Bennett, and I agreed with this since I used to do ethics stuff. Some medical decisions are difficult ethical decisions. This isn't one of them. If the parent wants to take the child and try that and has the ability to be able to do it, that should be the parent's prerogative.
There have been different people around the world who have weighed in. The Pope has weighed in, actually. And, at first his statement was a little muddled, but then he clarified it and said that, that we need to, if the parents want to keep this child alive, we need to make a decision on the side of life. President Trump has tweeted that he would help in any way he could. 37 members of parliament have demanded that the hospital, pull back on this issue. And so, it's becoming now a big issue. I even heard a good friend of the mother, her name is, I think, Connie Yates, speak. And she said, it just doesn't seem like this child is in pain. So that argument that they are making that we need to relieve the pain, that doesn't seem like he is in pain. He hasn't really been on pain medicine. He's not acting like he is. So that argument may be, not really that valid. But I'd love to know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. The number's 800-351-1212. I think one of the issues here is socialized medicine, not so much for the financial end of it, although I'm sure that's the reason why they got the ball rolling in the courts, because the hospital was saying, we've done enough here. We've spent enough. But then these parents surprised everybody by going out and raising the money.
Right, and that's the key issue. In a government-run healthcare system, there is never enough money to go around. All healthcare dollars have to compete with other types of dollars that the government typically spends on education, defense, security, welfare, and other things. And as a result, there is never enough money to run around, to go around. When people say, well, we look at these other countries that have single-payer systems and they spend a lot less than we do, That's true. That's because the government gives them less to spend. It's not because they couldn't viably spend the money in a better way. It's just the government says, this is how much money you have to spend, period. Make do with what you have. And so under a single payer system like that, if I'm spending money here, I'm taking money away from somebody else. And so in fairness to them, if there's somebody over here who could have a hip replacement, let's say, at the age of 50 and could benefit significantly, but Charlie Gard is taking money away from them and they don't think there's a chance, then from their standpoint, letting Charlie Gard go makes a certain amount of sense because you help the other person. In a system like ours where there is no cap on how much we can spend, you wouldn't do something like that.
There's something called, and since you are an expert in medical ethics, medical futility. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's where they are now. They're saying that this is futile. That's right.
The powers that be, the doctors or the bureaucrats, have decided that there's no chance of survival or improvement, and so that's medically futile treatment, and they feel like it's not worth spending the money. And that's where, if you were going back and saying this was being done under the National Health Service so that you were taking money away from people who might be able to benefit more, then you have that kind of rationale going on. But you don't have that in this situation. People have chipped in the money. The family is willing to take the child out of the National Health Service and bring it to America and pay for the care. So this is not a tough ethical decision.
All right, but to sort of preserve the system, the government healthcare socialized medicine system that they have in Great Britain, do you think that they may feel that it's somewhat of an embarrassment to this system and to the whole cause of socialized medicine that care is available in the United States, where we have a free system, more free, but not there? In other words, there's better medical care in the U.S. because we don't have the system they have.
Maybe. My sense, though, is that most of them over there feel like they are morally superior because they have a national health insurance system. And you hear that from a Bernie Sanders, that if you have that, you're morally superior. I would argue that, but those systems, the issue is always that the vulnerable people, the very young, the very old, the very weak, the very infirm, those are the ones at the margins that you let slide so that you can preserve the system for the vast majority of people in the middle there. And that's what we're seeing here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're taking your calls again, 800-351-1212. Jeannie is listening in on GNN in Florida. Hi, Jeannie. What do you think about this?
Well, my issue is who's got the right to say when somebody dies. You know, I feel like God's the one that gives us life. He's the one that takes it away. And if I got a child or a family that's critical, I'm going to do the best I can to keep them comfortable until he says, because even doing that, you got some guilt whenever they die. Could I have done anything more? Could I have done anything better? You know, so I just don't think any of us has got the right to say, you know, I'm God and I'll tell you when you can die and when you can't.
You know, in these cases where it's hard, in these cases where doctors tell you that it's futile, that, you know, really for Charlie Gard, there's nothing to say that this treatment is going to help him. It's very experimental. And so, you know, you can make a calculation, I think, as a family. I think if his parents were to say, okay, we'll let him go, then I don't think they would be immoral or wrong to do it. But the truth is they have not said that. They're his parents, and they have gone out and just gone to a huge amount of trouble to raise a lot of money. So I believe that they're the ones with the rights.
Well, you have the difference between passive and active euthanasia. And active euthanasia, most of us oppose. Passive euthanasia typically is the notion that somebody is on life support. They could not survive on their own. And so if you take away the breathing tube or whatever they're doing there, they would die naturally. Then some families come to the conclusion that, look, there's no chance of them recovering. They're brain dead. We're just sort of keeping them alive through various medical technology. Go ahead and remove that, and then if they survive, fine. But if they don't, so that's generally considered sort of acceptable in that realm. But the parents don't want to do that, and the parents should rule in this case.
The parents are the parents.
The parents are the parents.
Jeannie, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, we lost you for a minute, and so I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I don't even remember. I just said, Jesus is Lord, and I've been with him for 44 years, and I've been through a whole lot. I went through a whole lot when my husband was killed in an accident.
Wow.
And I learned a whole lot. Learned a whole lot from the Holy Spirit. That God, let him be God. I was
God be God.
help.
Jeannie, thank you for your call. We're about up on a break, but I really appreciate you sharing with us. We'll be right back with your calls. Stay with us. Right around the time we celebrate Independence Day, Canada celebrates Canada Day. July 1st marked 150 years since Canada became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. The U.S. has a longer history of independence. But when it comes to implementing radical social policy, Canada is outpacing the United States. Wisely, the U.S. Defense Department decided last week to take a step back to look at whether it's really a good idea to allow open transgenders to be inducted into the military, as had been mandated by the previous administration. But Canada is moving full speed ahead with its progressive transgender agenda. Ontario, Canada's most populous province, recently passed a law that could allow the government to remove children from their adoptive and foster homes if their parents decline to affirm and cater to their gender confusion. This is the 5th law Ontario has enacted related to gender ideology in the past 5 years. In 2012, Ontario's Human Rights Code was altered to add gender identity and gender expression when considering special protections. Bill 13, passed in 2012, compels public schools to guarantee that students can form gay-straight alliances and demanded that schools combat what's being termed homophobic and transphobic biases. In 2015, Bill 77 was enacted. This law prohibits parents from providing therapy for minors to help them attempt to fight their gender dysphoria or homosexual tendencies. Late in 2016 came Bill 28, which removed the terms mother and father from Ontario law and allows preconception agreements in which 4 unrelated people may become parents to a child. The think tank Cardis Family provides research on Canadian social policy. Its leader penned a warning published in the Daily Signal. It reads, 5 gender bills in 5 years makes Ontario's story a cautionary tale for our friends and neighbors to the south. We should pay attention. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to the final segment of Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and I'm so grateful to Dr. Merrill Matthews for being in studio with me today. And, Buddy, there's actually an update on this Charlie Gard story. I'm reading from the New York Times. London, in an abrupt shift, a London hospital said on Friday that it would reconsider its decision to turn off life support for Charlie Gard, a brain-damaged and terminally ill British infant, in light of fresh evidence about a potential treatment. So this Great Ormond Street Hospital, they made the statement, and they said that part of this is the attention of Pope Francis and President Trump. Mm-hmm. Two international hospitals and their researchers have communicated to us as late as the last 24 hours that they have fresh evidence about their proposed experimental treatment. The hospital said in the statement, and we believe, in common with Charlie's parents, it's right to explore this evidence.
Well, and I think they were also trying to get rid of all the blame that was being and criticism that was. So a good thing to do on that is to come up and sort of save face and say, we've looked at this experimental treatment again, and we think, well, maybe this is actually a possibility, so we'll let them, we'll reconsider. And so we'll see what happens here.
So now they're going back to court. Mm-hmm. They're going to ask the court to look at the case again in light of the claimed new evidence. I understood that the court was not saying they had to pull the plug on this little boy, but that they could. So I don't know why they have to go back to court, but they are.
Yeah, I thought that they were not going to be allowed to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, the other part of this was he wasn't even going to be allowed to go home.
Right.
So his parents said, we wanted to take him home to die. And they were saying, no, he has to stay. We will see. And if anything comes up before the end of the show, we'll report that. But let's go back to the phones. We are taking your calls at 800-351-1212. Troit is in Arizona. Hi, Troit. Thanks for calling in.
Yes. Yeah, everybody keeps kicking this health care around. You got a health care system that takes care of the poor, could take care of everybody, and at no expense to the government. The people that are working pay in. The companies that work people, $25 a week ain't going to break down, and then everybody's insured. The people that are working pay in. The people that aren't working don't pay in. The people on minimum wage, sure, is not going to pay as much as a person making more money, but
you want a federal system? Is that what you're advocating?
No, I don't want it to be a federal system. I want it to be health care. You kick the insurance company out of there to begin with. That saves 50% right there.
Yeah, but then you do have a federal system. Who's going to administer this?
Well, then you turn Medicare into a private health care system that bails the government out. And then you start feeding them all the money the government's taking from people and the insurance company's taking from people. And voila, you got a bunch of excess money.
Voila, does it work, Buddy Matthews?
I think it would be harder than Troy thinks. But one of the things he was talking about is that you have people paying in when they're working. One of the things that Governor Bredesen of Tennessee did when he found out that Medicaid was just simply not – Tennessee expanded Medicaid during the Clinton era, saying we just want to do a state version of the Clinton health care plan, and it's going to work so great that we're going to be able to eventually cover everybody in the state for less money than we're spending right now. Didn't work. But it also sounded a lot like Barack Obama.
But at least they only tried it on a state level.
Exactly right. But they expanded Medicaid significantly. It was breaking the state. Tennessee, like Texas, doesn't have a state income tax, and they were just they were doing a sales tax, and they were looking at creating an income tax or something to cover it. Bredesen finally came up in the mid-2000s and said, look, we got to do something different. So we're going to take a number of these people that are on Medicaid that are working, and we're going to offer them a plan where they're going to pay in $25 a month. $50 a month. The employer would pay $50 a month, and the state government would pay $50 a month, $150 a month, and that was going to provide them with a very basic insurance plan and so forth. So they tried to come up with something where everybody was chipping in a little bit for these lower income people, and he argued in the Wall Street Journal that it worked very well, and one of the reasons why he was not named to be Secretary of Health and Human Services under Barack Obama is because this was a limited health insurance plan and not comprehensive, and those who wanted sort of a single-payer system said, you can't have Bredesen being this. We need to have somebody who says everybody's got to have this huge comprehensive plan, not these limited plans.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, listen, thanks for your call, Troy, and let's go now to Lily in California listening in on KYCC. Hi, Lily.
Hi. Hello.
Thank you for calling. You're a nurse.
I'm actually a respiratory therapist, so
okay.
I assist physicians in intubating, basically putting breathing tubes down people who, are in respiratory distress or respiratory failure. But anywho, I commented earlier off the air, but I'm wondering, I have a question for you. So what would be working in the hospital and seeing that, like, especially with Obamacare, we have an influx of patients. I mean, so much that we don't even have beds. And this is with every hospital surrounding us, Sutter, Kaiser, you know, whatever the hospital is, we're faced with the same situation. And I being a Christian and being in the medical field, you know, trying to see, like, you know, it's good to take care of, you know, the poor, the homeless. But then at the same time, my parents that are nurses, they work, one works full-time, the other one works part-time, but based on their budget of the hospital budget, you know, they don't have insurance. So they have to, you know, buy their insurance. And it's so expensive, where my dad's delaying surgery because it's so expensive. And so I'm like, what is the best healthcare option for us in the U.S.? Because I don't really follow news because I'm always like.
So you are in the healthcare field, and you're just as confused as everybody else.
But it sounds like, Lily, that you're saying that you're seeing the hospitals are seeing an influx of patients, so much so that they don't have beds, and yet your parents, who are nurses, don't have health insurance to be able to cover them. Is that right?
Right, and that's why I'm frustrated, where I, you know, as a Christian, I should be taking care of people and, you know, with a pure heart. But at the same time, I find it so unfair that we that do get paid well, that work a lot, are having to pay a lot more for the others that make poor life choices. I'm not saying everyone does, you know, some have extraordinary scenarios or cases in their lives where, you know, they can't. But at the same time, I find it so unfair that, you know, really wealthy people have to pay so much to get, like, basic health care, and you know, and then you have someone who's extremely, you know, that doesn't work, that makes poor life choices, just get an easy pass, like, oh, surgery, no problem, this and that. But then with the Obamacare, I know with my parents, it's like, it's cheaper for them, not like they're not even paying for Obamacare. They got their Christian healthcare ministries and just delaying seeing a doctor because it's so much, because based on their income. So
people in the middle, it's hard for people in the middle right now.
It is hard for people in the middle right now because they may not be entitled to some of the subsidies or much of the subsidies under Obamacare, meaning they have to pay out of their pocket for that. That creates a problem for them, and yet you see lower income people able to get care because they now have Medicaid expansion.
Right. And it's also like, you know, regarding the case that you spoke about in London, where I feel like, you know, as a Christian, we want to preserve life as much as possible. God gives, God takes away. But I feel like there, you know, at the end of the day, there's so many cases that build up like that. And I think you have to be really, like, medically aware and trained to know, you know, what is the prognosis.
Yeah.
But, you know, some doctors want to push, like, oh, no, they can't sustain life, but they really can. At the same time,
Lily, I've got to let you go, but your call is, I mean, I think it really hits the nail on the head of the dilemma we are in, and we will not solve it today. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.